and welcome to the Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. I am, as usual, Jodelle, and I have a wonderful guest to share with you who is going to teach us how to move and play and be barefoot once again. He is an exuberant animal, so I'm happy to have with me today Frank Forencich. Did I say your name correctly, Frank?
Very good, thank you.
Okay, great. Frank, I'm just going to briefly introduce you to the folks and let you know why I am so enthralled with you, and I think that they will be too. So you got a degree in human biology at Stanford, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and you hold a black belt in Karate and Aikido. Is that how you say it?
Right.
Yeah, and you've studied the human origins and our ancestral environment during trips to Africa, and you have some very well-written books, The New Old Way and The Exuberant Animal, which is a way that you educate and engage people on how to get the most out of being human, which I love that. Like, I think sometimes we've lost what being human really means. So that's why I'm excited to have you on the show today. I mean, I talk a lot about nutrition. I talk a lot about sunlight and grounding and EMF and things like that. But you have a whole nother perspective on play and movement and what we're going to talk about today, like the energy snack. And also, I want to jump right in with your brief history, but then I want to talk right about this mismatch that you've got me so intrigued to learn about. So just give me a brief history on you and what got you into living barefoot and free like this.
Well, first of all, I live in the mountains, and there's like 2 feet of snow on the ground right now, so I don't go barefoot on the snow. I go barefoot when I can.
Yeah, sure.
That's all great, but my history is a little bit interesting because when I was a kid, I was really sick, and I had a lot of digestive problems and allergy problems and that sort of thing. And that didn't really resolve until I got involved in swimming and water polo in high school. And the exercise really changed my body, really changed my health. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was this fit as my peers. And that really changed my whole outlook on everything, because I became a convert, you might say, and an exercise evangelist, you know.
Yeah.
And then I got involved in martial arts and in rock climbing and just everything to do with the body.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was an undergrad at Stanford, and my professors were saying, hey, if you really are interested in the body, you really have to go to Africa to find out where you came from. And at the time, there wasn't that much known about human history, but I took a chance and I said, okay, I'm going to go. And I went to Olduvai, and I went to Gombe, and I went to all the hot spots in Africa, and I gained an appreciation of my ancestry and where I came from, and everything else has flowed from that. So it was quite an adventure.
Wow, that's awesome. So as far as like what you found on your trips to Africa, what was the biggest thing that you took away from that?
Well, just how big it is and how intimidating it is, and what a challenge it would have been to make a living in those conditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more than just being a good athlete and running down the antelope. There's a lot more to it than that. And so I really got an appreciation for that, because it's not at all obvious how you would eat and how you would survive. And you need a tribe, you need an oral tradition. And those are some of the things I discovered along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree that we've lost the sense of we need a tribe, we need our immediate village. You know, I have another podcast where I talk about we've got this worldwide village that we take better care of than we do our immediate village, our own inner circle of people that we see, you know, any given day. Even somebody such as the local coffee shop where you frequent and you know that person by heart every day. You know, those are the people that we kind of forget to take care of, but we're quick to go on Instagram and Facebook and take care of this virtual village that when the chips are down may never take care of us like our immediate village will. So I wonder if this has anything to do with the word, the mismatch you were talking about, or can you tell me what that is?
Right. Well, when I talk about mismatch, that's the popular terminology in academics, they call it the evolutionary discordance hypothesis. So it's much easier just to talk about mismatch. And it's the basic idea that our bodies are really ancient. Our bodies are very, very old, and they didn't change much through evolution. Change came very slowly. And now all of a sudden we've had this cultural and environmental change over the last several hundred years that has given us a world that's profoundly different than the world we evolved to live in. And so that's a mismatch. And for some of the things about the modern world are beneficial, but a lot of them are not. And we don't have, our bodies are not adapted to that, and we don't have structures in place to deal with that mismatch. And a lot of us blame ourselves for our inability to deal with the modern world, but it's really a fundamental problem. So that's the mismatch, and that's what we're going to have to deal with going forward.
Yeah, talk to me about that, like how we don't know how to deal with ourselves in this modernized world, because I think people have got so conditioned to just listen to what mainstream media tells them to do versus that inner knowing of what a human being should be doing. Do you get what I'm saying?
Well, I think the first step is just realizing how abnormal our environment really is.
Yes.
And I actually sat down one day, in one of my books, it has a list of all the things that are evolutionarily normal and everything that is abnormal. And if you look at the time, here's the thing that most people don't get, the time spans of human history. Because if our species is 300,000 years old, things didn't really change until the last 10,000 years, and things didn't like really change for the last 300. So 99% of our history is as hunter-gatherers. Right. And that is the touchstone. That is normal human experience. And during that time, all the things that were normal were moving our bodies in outdoor natural terrain, sleeping out, eating natural food from habitat, living in tribes that were primarily egalitarian, pretty level hierarchies, and living a circadian rhythmic lifestyle. All of that is totally normal versus all the things that we do now that are distinctly alien. Alien nutritional environment, alien physical environment, alien social environment, alien temporal. Everything about the modern world is abnormal. So that's the first step, I think, is to realize how abnormal things are and then start to take corrective measures along the way.
I love that. Like I really agree with you that people don't see how abnormal life has become because we're conditioned to it now. So like, what would you say as regarding all those things you mentioned, what would be the biggest misconception about what being human actually is?
Well, I think we're so conditioned and adapted to economic systems, social systems, this idea of work. Work is an abnormal construct of the modern world. Hunter-gatherers didn't work. They've been called, the Bushmen of Africa have been called the original affluent society. They didn't really work at all. I mean, they would go out and hunt a little bit and gather a little bit, but it only took maybe 10 hours a week to secure what they needed. So most of their time was given over to just enjoying life. And that's the normal situation. So we have to take that into account and really, you might say, fight back against the modern world.
Yeah, because I agree that people are not enjoying life. Like people are working themselves to the bone. And I ask several of my clients, you know, what do you do as a hobby? What do you do for fun, for relaxation, for regeneration? And they don't know. Like they just cram so much into one day that they're cramming everything in so they can crash into bed at night and do it all over again the next day. But they have no outlet of play or of purpose or of passion. And that's a very big element of being human. So and this trend of like paleo, primal, ancestral, you know, it's a big trend, but are we really primal with electric cars and toilet paper and sunglasses, you know, like, or is it just a misconception that people think that they're actually being more natural than they really are?
Yeah, it's hard because a lot of this gets back to marketing and image, and a lot of that I think is just a glossy layer on top of normal modern life, and it's better than nothing. But we really need to change at a fundamental level, and the challenge is that if we're to do that, we have to do pretty radical things like quitting our day jobs and totally transforming our economic system so that people have time to actually live. And you know, people are talking about doing that now, but we really need to redesign society with the body in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we have yet to do that. I mean, even simple things like, for example, we know that teenagers have a different sleep pattern than adults do. And the teenagers need to sleep in later in the morning. And just a simple change of getting school systems to start their classes later in the morning, that's been a real uphill fight. Some school systems have done that, but it should be across the board, taking the human body into account. And we're really not doing that, because I think our inclination is to disrespect the body and to use it. We treat the body the same way we treat habitat, which is that we treat it as a resource to be exploited. And we only worry about it wrong and then fix it. But that's not the way to do it. You know, indigenous cultures, native cultures respected habitat and respected the body. And that's what we need to start doing as well.
Well, and going back to indigenous cultures, like you mentioned, the tribe, like I loved how you described paleo living as actually putting ourselves into the right relationship with habitat and tribe. Sensation, learning, memory, opportunism, attachment, and social intelligence. I love that quote that you had. So tell me more about that.
Right. Well, putting ourselves back in right relationship with the world, I think it's not everybody looks at the environmental crisis right now. We look for technological fixes, which we should. And that's all fine and good. Recycle your stuff as we should. But what we really need to do is change our value system so that more of our attention goes towards our life support systems, to start honoring these things as what actually sustains us and keeps us alive. We can change all our technology and come up with new systems for having less impact on the earth and, remediated some of the damage that we've done. But unless we as a people and a culture start to honor the habitat and the tribe that keeps us alive, nothing's really going to change. So it's values that have to change.
Yeah, kind of like what I call the law of connectedness. Like instead of being connected online, which I know we have the privilege of doing today for a general purpose, but I mean day-to-day connecting online versus the law of connectedness where you meet face-to-face with those people in your tribe on a daily to weekly basis. I think that's part of what we're missing out on too. So as far as like your feel about certain things about our environment, like EMF or radiation, what do you feel about that, or blue light exposure?
Right. Well, I'm not an expert in any of those fields, really. I haven't studied that stuff in depth, but it stands to reason that this is an abnormal sensory input, and that's reason enough to be skeptical of it. And the idea of sitting at a computer all day, what you've done, even the EMF, even if we're to disregard that, just the sensory distortion that we have, because remember, our senses work best in an integrated fashion. So when you're working vision in conjunction with tactile stimulation and with auditory stimulation, all of these things in a together setting work together. And that's integrated sense. But when you're a computer, it's almost 100% visual. That's a distortion of your sensory experience. And just that alone is enough to raise alarm bells in my mind. It's as if all you ever did was listen, or all you ever did was tactile.
Right.
You want it all together in one package.
Well, maybe that's why I can only spend about 2 hours at most on a computer at any given time before I start to go crazy. So. What about with nutrition? Like, what kind of nutrition ideas do you practice and recommend? Like, with your work after being in Africa and all the different cultures you saw, like, what is your philosophy on nutrition?
Right. Well, it's a little bit tough to draw lessons from the paleo, just because there were so many different habitats and so many different tribes around the world that were in a so-called paleo diet. Because if you live in Southern Africa, you're going to eat one kind of diet, or if you live in the Arctic, you're going to eat a different kind of diet. So it's hard to draw lessons, but you can say that all these people were eating real food directly from habitat. Right. And so I came up with this distinction that I find useful, and that's to make a distinction between earth food and space food. And Earth food is something that has a story that connects us to the land and the people that produce the food. So there's a story there. There's some sort of continuity between you and the food that you're eating. But space food is just a substance that appears in your life. And it doesn't have a story. So maybe it comes from Amazon and it comes on your doorstep. That's really not much of a story. And even if it's biochemically perfect, that's still, it doesn't speak to you, and it doesn't tell you a story of habitat or tribe. And that's space food. And the problem, of course, is that we've come to rely on space food, and most of us eat space food most of the time. Mm-hmm. So now the challenge is, how can we find our way back to some sort of earth food that has a story that bonds us to habitat and tribe? And
yeah,
that helps. That helps.
Yeah, totally groovy, because like I like to say the word earth-based versus plant-based, or, you know, just to appeal that no matter what way or style you eat, it should still be from the earth, and even from your latitude if possible, because that's where we would be more like those tribes you're talking about, where they just ate the food that was available where they lived. And so, yes, I love the earth approach versus the space food, which honestly makes you feel spacey anyway when you eat it. So there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and again, I'm not a big expert in nutrition. There's a lot of people who know more about it than I do, but that's the one thing I can bring to the table, so to speak, is that distinction. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, so your expertise, I know we've touched on certain different things, but would be more of that play and movement, and bringing people back to the idea of being human, and maybe even barefoot when it's available. Is that what you would kind of describe yourself more in the expertise of?
Yeah, and I came to this from you might say, a strange place, because I was involved in the martial arts for a long time, and I went to a dojo, a training studio, mm-hmm. where the sensei, the head teacher, had a pretty nice balanced attitude between gravity and levity. You know, there were certain rules that we had to abide by, but that made room for play. Mm-hmm. And the play came in the form of sparring and moving with your partner and that sort of thing. And I was just delighted to do that. You know, as a young man, I think young men are given towards this rough and tumble kinds of play. And it was just delightful. And we had with the discipline plus the play was a combination that kept people really focused, really engaged with one another. And I believed at the time that there were other benefits as well. And so I went on to read about animal play behavior. A lot of people in the neuroscience community believe that play is essential for child development. And we've also seen studies in play deprivation, where if you take, for example, rodents and you deprive them of play, and that's easy to do, you can just isolate them from their mates, mm-hmm. They grow up with some profound social deficits mm-hmm. when they get older. And that's a slam dunk. I mean, that is exactly what's happening in the modern world right now. We're so overprotective of children, and we're so regiment their experience so much now that a lot of kids grow up with really no opportunity to cut loose with free play. And we expect to see social deficits as they grow older. So that's kind of an ominous thing. Mm-hmm. But going back to the martial art thing, that was such a playground for me, and I'll never forget that. It was perfect.
And do you still practice that too?
Yes, in fact, that's what I have blended into the Exuberant Animal method, is to find not everybody has the inclination to do martial arts, mm-hmm. but there are certain moves and there's a certain culture to that you can bring to an exercise class or a movement class that really works. And people are delighted when they discover, wow, you know, I could still play, and I could do it in such a way that is a lot more fun than exercise.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned that when you watched animals, that they were very playful. Even as adults, they seem to be as well. I've been noticing that with this little cat I have, that's a little Manx cat, and he's now getting to be an adult cat. He was coming out of the teenage years, but he still wants to like attack and play and wants to pounce on my daughter or something like that, but for no reason other than the thrill of this playful movement. It seems like he's not getting anything else out of it. But it's just interesting that animals never seem to lose that, but people do. And I think it is very much conditioned by parenting skills of saying, no, act this way, not that way, do this, not that, grow up quickly, do all your studies, make sure that you get into the best college, forget about living your best life, just do what everybody sets the standards for you to do. And I know you mentioned the exuberant animal, and so I wanted you to touch on that exactly, like how we as humans could condition ourselves back into what you call the exuberant animal versus what society is kind of pushing us towards.
Right. Well, some people are just plain good at playing, and they have some discipline or some art where they just love it, and that's play for them. It's difficult to talk about human play because we have so many varieties of human play. And what I do with the exuberant animal approach is I just set up an environment where people are going to interact with a little bit of instruction, and I give them a game and set them loose, and then they can go with that. So it's helpful to have a teacher to give some guidance. If you take a bunch of people and put them in a room and say, okay, it's time to play now, that's actually too broad an instruction for people, because people don't know what to do with that. Right. So you got to narrow it down and say, okay, play with this movement here, or play with the medicine ball. The medicine ball is perfect for that. Mm-hmm. And here's a couple of example moves. And once you set that up for them, then they can go on.
Oh, that's great. So tell me more about some different games that you have authenticated to help people learn to play.
Well, for example, I often start with something called animal magnetism. And we just get people to touch each other, say at the wrist, and we designate one person as a coach and the other person as an athlete. And the coach is to take the athlete on a good experience. So if I'm the coach, I will make some movements, and the athlete has to stay connected at the wrist and move wherever I move. So that person has to sense where I am in space. And there's no competition involved. It's just follow the movement that the coach provides. And so this animal magnetism gets you these new movements in a new context. And it's super fun. You can match at the shoulder and say, okay, I'm the coach, you're the athlete, just go where I go and maintain the connection.
Wow.
So it's social, it's physical, and it's super fun, because sometimes you break the connection, you laugh, and then you get it back again. And I usually start my sessions with some animal magnetism.
Oh, I love that. That's a beautiful way to get humans to be connected again without even, using verbiage. They're just physically connecting, and we miss out on that too. It's like a lot of people don't even hug when they see each other anymore.
Right. We live in a low touch culture, and we need to remedy that somehow. And that's one place where PE teachers and movement teachers can make a difference.
Okay, I definitely need to come train with you so I can bring these elements of magnetism into my fitness classes, because I think that would be a really fun way to get people more connected just in that local little community. But you mentioned to me before that fitness isn't really something that is maybe a word or something we should adhere to, and that exercise and movement are two different things. So I agree. And I want you to explain to my listeners just exactly why we seem so primed for fitness, but we're missing out on movement, so to speak.
Right. Well, I love playing with the language here. And when I started getting into it, I realized that exercise is a really modern word. It's a modern concept. And it's only maybe a couple hundred years old. It goes back to the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. And not only that, it has a lot of connotations. It brings a lot of baggage with it. A lot of people believe that exercise is inherently unpleasant. Mm. And so then you have to have all these carrots and sticks to motivate people to do the exercise. And, you give them rewards, or you give them fear. So, you have to exercise because otherwise you're going to get lifestyle disease. Mm-hmm. But in contrast, movement is this word that's ancient, it's primordial, and it opens up the field, because now it's not just the typical exercise movements, it's a bigger category. So now it includes things like housework and blue collar labor and sex, and anything move your body, that's movement. And it also puts you in connection with every other animal that's ever lived on this planet. That's a common experience, is movement. Non-human animals do not exercise. I've been to Africa, I've seen the chimpanzees in the wild. They do not exercise. They climb trees, they play, they hunt, they do everything. But you couldn't convince them to exercise. So why are we exercising? Mm-hmm. That's the distinction that I often make. The other one is the word fitness versus the word adaptation. Fitness is a really confusing word because the biologists use it in a completely different way. For a biologist, the word fitness means reproductive success, mm-hmm. or the ability to generate lots of viable offspring. And that's not what we're talking about in the gym, right? In the gym, you're talking about something different. So that's why it's so confusing. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think adaptation is probably a more useful word. But the distinction between movement and exercise, that one's really useful. And it's starting to catch on. I hear a lot more people describing themselves as movement teachers.
Yes.
Fewer people saying, I do exercise.
That's great. I know. I would love to be able to say that. So I need to work on putting that out there, because like you said, the society is so conditioned that if you don't call it a fitness class, or you don't call yourself a fitness instructor, they don't know what you're doing, and they don't care, because it doesn't sound like something that's going to make them lose 10 pounds, So it's like I'm grasping at straws trying to get my local community to understand that let's do fun things. I'm a professional stand-up paddler, and so I'm trying to get the paddle community involved with free paddles to just come out, get your board, get on the water, get nature, get sunshine, and get community while you're out on top of creation, So it's something that's very hard, though, because people see that as just an activity. They don't see that as fitness. And whereas it's the most important fitness, because it actually lowers the stress response in the body, whereas other forms of exercise actually induce a stress response.
Right. And for a long time, I bought into this whole idea you have to go out and suffer, mm-hmm. and you have to really beat yourself up to get the super compensation and the response. And I think there is a place for that, for really hard efforts, but it doesn't have to happen all the time, and it doesn't have to be chronic. No. It can come in cycles and in a rhythm. Yeah. So sometimes play, sometimes work, and that's a good rhythm.
Yeah, and it's so true what we were saying about animals. Like, animals don't have to work out. I mean, think of a deer, for instance. My husband is a bow hunter, and I've recently gotten into it. And just watching the deer, they don't move a whole lot until something spooks them, and then they jump and run and play. But they actually seem to conserve their energy out in the wild to just meander through the forest, and yet they stay really lean because they don't overexert themselves. They're not purposefully putting themselves in a stress-induced state. They're just focused on living their best life that day, finding their nourishment, being with their little tribe that they travel around with. So, yeah, I think if we would mimic more of them, we'd be just as lean as they are.
Yeah, that's their natural state. The body wants to be healthy.
Right.
And so we derail it from that.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the barefoot topic, because my whole life I have been this little girl that wanted to be barefoot all the time. In fact, my feet are like dog paws now, because I just can run across gravel and I can climb trees barefoot. And so people make fun of how disgusting the bottom of my feet are. But I understand the benefit of barefooting in my own sense, but tell my listeners about the importance of being barefoot.
Well, it's one more piece of the total sensory experiment. And as soon as you put on shoes, you're depriving yourself of a substantial amount of sensation. So you're less able to know and understand the world. And it's like covering one eye and going through the world. So, and I'm sure you could study the neurological benefits at a deep level. That would be fine. But it brings in sensation generally, but it also fine tunes your biomechanics and your ability to walk gracefully. I mean, that proprioceptive feedback is essential to having smooth gait. And if you grow up with shoes on and wear shoes for your entire life, you've probably got proprioceptive deficits in the way your body works. Your ankles, your knees, your hips are all a little bit dumber than they would be otherwise. So that information isn't just a good thing to have. It actually fine tunes your locomotor performance. And I think that a lot of the injuries that we suffer in the lower extremities could be traced back to that proprioceptive deficit that people have. So even if you only go during the summer, you're still doing pretty good at fine tuning your locomotion.
Yeah, that is so profound, because when I take people out for their very first paddle lesson, one of the first things they'll complain about is their feet are burning or their feet are hurting or cramping. And I say, well, are you mostly in shoes? And they go, oh yeah, I have I have a low arch or a high arch, or I need this, or I have orthotics or whatever. And I said, okay, well, you actually need to paddle a little bit more then, because we need to strengthen your feet. Your feet are gripping the board for stability while you're out there, and they actually are working the muscles of the feet. And in my own experience, I just feel like shoes are actually dumbing our feet down and atrophying the muscles and the nerves of our feet as well. So would you agree?
Oh, totally. The other thing that I've noticed is that people are resistant to the idea because they don't trust their body. They don't trust their ability to navigate over rough terrain barefoot. And this is something I learned early on when I started to barefoot, was that, wow, you can step on a sharp rock and you will not cut your foot. Your body is a lot smarter than that, because as soon as it feels the notch, the negative sensation in the sole of your feet, it cuts out some of the muscular support in that leg so that you glide over that. Your body will not hurt itself on a sharp rock. And once you learn to trust, then you could do anything. I mean, I've hiked some really rough trails barefoot, and you get bruised up a little bit, but no, you do great.
Yeah, and therein lies the power of getting that natural movement too, when you're not confined to something that's how do you say, making the movement of your foot happen, versus really being on that different terrain and allowing your body to respond in different mechanical behaviors based on the terrain. So going back to movement, you have something that you like to call an energy snack. Can you tell my listeners what an energy snack is?
Right. Well, variously called a movement snack as well. And this is something where I'm targeting real world, modern world conditions where people are working in offices and you don't have time to go to the gym, for example, and you don't have time for an hour and a half sweaty workout, but you do have 5 minutes while your computer is rebooting or whatever. And I've got a series of about a dozen different movements that you can perform in an office, at your desk, obviously getting up out of your chair, but things that you can do indoors in that context that can really keep your energy level high. And there's simple things like squats or doing push-ups on your desk. And there's a few rotational movements that I have in there. And they're fun and they're easy, and boom, then you do 5 minutes, you get back to work, you feel a lot better, and you can spread those out through the day. You do 4 or 5 movement snacks through the day, you're ending up feeling a whole lot better.
And I would say a whole lot better than if you went to the vending machine when you needed an actual energy snack. Then I think that the snack you're talking about is more long lasting than the effects you're going to get from some sort of space food, basically.
Right. And the obstacle here is that you have to be willing to be, you might say, openly physical in your world. Because in a lot of office spaces, people are inhibited to move their bodies just because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. They feel it's like deviant behavior to move their body in an office setting. But you got to get over that, because being physical is who you are. That's your ancestry.
Right.
you need to honor that. It's the other condition that is the abnormal condition.
So
So,
can you demonstrate an energy movement snack for us?
sure. I love these arm swings. This is something I do a lot of because it's a mimic of normal locomotion. And now I can get a little bit of bounce into my legs, which have been doing nothing for the last hour at the computer. So I get this, and then I take that a little bit higher, and now I'm touching at the top and getting my legs involved. So trying to integrate all the way through my torso. Then I will do standing backstroke. This one is quite good because my upper back has been getting torched by all this flexed posture for the last hour, whatever it is. So here I do a lot of that, and then I will do one-legged squats right at the desk. This is a good one. Or planks and push-ups at the desk, or even bird dogs at the desk.
Yeah, very cool.
Right, but so you don't have to get sweaty. You don't have to get down on the floor. You don't have to do anything really bizarre. The other one I do is I take the medicine ball, because I have one in my office, and I just get up high with the medicine ball and study my posture for a few minutes like this. So I'm not pumping the ball at all. But what I'm doing is seeing, okay, how does my spine feel? How do my shoulders feel? And this one's actually robust if you take it for 5 or 10 minutes, and a big benefit to posture.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so I'm getting a huge medicine ball for my little standing desk so that in the midst of standing, I can sometimes just grab that and put it over my head. So.
Medicine ball is my one favorite movement toy.
Excellent. Well, I love the physicality of it. And you also would see that as like an antidote, like to the computer life, to the desk jockeys out there. But you have another thing that I think was called an antidote that I wanted you to talk about. Can you discuss kind of your exuberant animal antidote to?
That was just a list. It was like a postcard that we put out that just had, you might say, a holistic list of things to do. Eat real food, drink clean water, get outside every day, get your sleep. And these are, everybody knows these, but it was just a way to present that to the world.
Yeah.
The one that's interesting there is the last one, talking about meaning, because we're starting to hear a lot more research coming out that shows having a sense of meaning and purpose can trump all those other things.
Right. Yes.
This gets back to Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. And the quote you hear all over the place now is, he who has a why to live can endure almost any how. And that's really powerful. And a lot of people, if you're just working for a paycheck and that's all you're doing, you're maybe missing out on that one. So that's worth another look.
Yeah, that last one is what I kind of call vitamin P, pleasure, passion, purpose, and like that meaning in the world. And so this whole list here to me is such good medicine. Like, instead of taking supplements, this is really what we should be supplementing our life with. Yeah, I really value your profound nature that you've taken with your work and with helping people understand what it is to be human. So let's talk about your books and what people could expect if they were going to check out The New Old Way and The Exuberant Animal. And I mean, you have other books as well.
Right. The other one's called Beautiful Practice. And these are all clustered around the same idea of what's the body experiencing in the modern world. And how do we address that? Because it's a huge subject. And growing up in California back in the 1970s, I'm really interested in holistic health. I mean, I always try and get back to that. How do we round it out? How do we keep the whole thing in mind going forward? And in particular, the most recent book, New Old Way, is an attempt to do that. And especially in the context of our modern environmental crisis. It's like, what does it mean now to be physically adapted when the biosphere is at risk? So that's something that I try and take head on. And I try to draw a line between my body and that. It's like, how do we remain relevant? And that's what the book is.
So is it kind of like, how do you live the old way in the modernized society? Is that what the tips are that you're giving in there?
The big dilemma right now, and a lot of people have touched on this, we don't really know whether to go back or go forward. And
Okay.
this is all over the place. The modern technological world that we're in seems headed for a cliff. And that, just to sustain what we're doing, go straight ahead, that doesn't seem like a viable option. But to go back to live in the old hunter-gatherer way, that doesn't seem viable either. There's not enough land, there's too many people, we don't have an oral tradition, there's a million reasons why that wouldn't work either. So whatever is going to work, it has to be some kind of hybrid. And other people have tried to do this, east-west hybrids, new old hybrids, something like that, taking the best of indigenous native worldviews, trying to marry that together with some of our technological expertise now and come up with a solution that works. And I'm one of the people who's trying to do that.
Okay, well, I can't wait to read that book. I've got The Exuberant Animal on the way, and so I can't wait to read that one too. But just going through your website, I mean, you have so much to offer right on there. Talk about the training you offer, because I'm really interested in that.
Right. Well, for this coming year, we're going to have this pretty unique event called Outback. And Outback is based on the idea that experience is the master teacher. Experience is what speaks to the human nervous system more than anything else. And a little background there, I've been to a lot of conferences. I've been to a lot of academic conferences and scientific conferences, and they're all the same. They all take place in a hotel conference room. And there's a lot of PhD level presentations where a speaker will get up behind a podium and present their data. So you have a talking head with a real emphasis on cognitive content. And that goes on for a couple, 3 days at a time, where people are seated the whole time. And the biggest disconnect there is where sometimes you get people getting up and delivering these cognitive presentations about why it's so important to move your body, or why it's so important to go outside. And after a while, listen to that, it's like we're sitting in this conference room with somebody telling us it's really important to go outside, really disconnected. So my idea with this Outback experience is to go to a primitive camp in Central Oregon, gather people there, we're going to camp, and we're going to do the same stuff. We're going to have presentations, and we're going to have movement classes, and we'll do art and good social bonding and the whole thing. And the only trick is you got to get there, and you've got to camp. You've got to be able to, have some camping skills and come, and you mostly take care of your own food. We'll have some group meals as well. And then we'll have, like I say, presentations, storytelling, and group movement classes from a lot of different movement teachers. And that's what makes it really exciting, because you come, you don't know quite what you're going to get, but it's going to be good.
Yeah.
So that's all on the website.
When is that the next one that you're doing of that?
Well, I will be there in camp from early May through the middle of June. And
okay, so it's just different dates, different times. People can just come during that time.
People come when they can. It's a 3-day minimum. You've got to commit to being there for at least 3 days, but it's open-ended. So you can stay for 5 or 7 or longer. And that's what makes it interesting too, because there will be times in camp when there will be maybe, and there'll be times in camp when there'll be a lot of people. Right. And you just.
Well, and I love the price point on it. When I looked on your website, it's very affordable, and you even option a price for, like, maybe if there's practitioners out there or teachers that would like to give some presentations. I mean, there's even a way that they can participate. And also, I wanted to touch on the fact that you are telling people to limit their technology, which I love that, because it is, like you said, these conferences you go to, it's like everybody's on a device, everybody's supposed to be at this ancestral health symposium, but they're all like on a device and sitting and indoors. And I've never understood that, so I've never gone to any of them.
Yeah, it's true. And I don't expect people to give it up entirely.
Right.
So we'll have a little bit of access to that, but it will be discouraged.
Yeah.
And if you have to escape and do a message and then get back, that's fine. But
sure.
The less the better.
And so they can find out more about this. You want to share your website and just kind of how they can know more? Because I'm definitely interested in this myself.
Cool. Well, yeah, just go to the Exuberant Animal website, type in Exuberant Animal and you'll find it. And then just go to the main menu with Outback and all right there.
Awesome. Well, Frank, this has been so enlightening. And I really appreciate your time. And is there anything else you'd like to leave my listeners with before I let you go today?
Turn off your computer and go outside.
That's what I'm going to do.
The last 40 minutes, so it's time to go outside.
Exactly. Well, thank you once again. And hopefully we can do this again soon. Maybe we'll even do it from the Outback experience. Wouldn't that be an ideal place? All right. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.
Okay. Bye for now. If aging is all part of being human, then anti-aging is somewhat of a fallacy. But we can for sure focus on positive aging and doing so in a way that keeps our skin vibrant and supple. For that, I recommend the organic and well-crafted skincare line, Anne Marie Gianni. To try it out in a little sample form, click the link in the show notes and try their $9.99 Restore Kit and let them help you become more positive about aging. It's only $9.99. Click the link and check them out today. Hey out there, so you've heard me talk a lot about F-bombs, dropinfbomb.com. So you may know they have nut butter packets, oil packets like avocado oil and olive oil for on the go, these handy little packets. But did you know that they now have, let me show you the right way, F-bomb Keto Crunch, and my toddler loves these. So these are little cheese crisps, and they're made from dairy that's without growth hormone, no artificial flavors, no gluten, and they're a nice healthy fat with only one carbohydrate. So it's pretty cool. Check them out, dropinfbomb.com, and use the code GETFIT to save 20% off your purchase. That's GETFIT to save 20% off your Keto Crunch purchase. You better hurry, because the last time I checked they were sold out. So I'm assuming they're going to be getting some more, but keep checking back, because these are wonderful. If not for you, then for the little one in your life to take on the go with you.